Julian Reed stood frozen as the board members filed out of the conference room. Their disappointed glances cut deeper than any words could. His father's investment firm, Red Financial, had just lost $230 million on the clean energy venture Julian had championed against everyone's advice. "You destroyed 3 generations of work in one decision," his father, Richard Reed, said quietly. "The board wants you removed from all positions." Julian loosened his tie. "Dad, the technology works. We just need more time. Enough." Richard's fist hit the mahogany table. "Your grandfather built this company from nothing. I expanded it. Across 3 continents. And you, ... double quotes, his voice broke. "You nearly bankrupted us with your idealistic fantasies." That evening, the story broke across financial news networks. Reed heirs catastrophic green energy gamble. The family name that had once opened doors now invited mockery and whispers. "I can't be associated with this," said Olivia Hartwell, lighting her engagement ring across the table at the restaurant where they'd first met 3 years ago. "My father's investment firm can't risk the connection. You understand, don't you?" Julian stared at the diamond, catching the dim light. "So 3 years means nothing when the money disappears." "Don't be cruel," she whispered, perfectly composed even now. "We both know marriage is more than emotions. It's a partnership, and you're toxic right now, Julian." His phone buzzed constantly with calls from former friends suddenly needing to reschedule plans. His cousin Thomas, who had always envied Julian's position in the family, seemed particularly delighted by the downfall. "Maybe now you'll learn what the real world is like." Thomas smirked at the family dinner Julian wasn't supposed to attend. "Not everything is handed to you on a silver platter." 2 weeks later, Julian packed a single suitcase and left his luxury condo. The financial penalties and legal settlements had stripped him of almost everything. A board had forced his father to cut him off completely to save the company's reputation. "Where will you go?" asked his mother, the only one who came to say goodbye. "Somewhere I can start over," Julian replied, hugging her tightly, as his bus pulled away from the gleaming skyline of Boston. Julian opened his notebook. Inside wasn't self-pity or regrets, but detailed drawings and calculations. The clean energy concept that had failed so spectacularly had a fatal flaw he'd finally identified, and he knew exactly how to fix it. Julian's new home was a studio apartment in Seattle's industrial district, a far cry from his penthouse in Boston. The single window overlooked a brick wall, and the ceiling leaked when it rained, which in Seattle meant almost daily baptisms of his determination. "Studio apartment is generous," muttered his new neighbor, an elderly man named Frank, who watched Julian struggle with his suitcase up the narrow stairs. "More like a closet with aspirations." During days, Julian worked at a small tech repair shop, fixing laptops and phones for minimum wage. At night, hunched over a second-hand desk, he refined his energy storage design by lamplight. The concept that had bankrupted his family's confidence in him became his obsession. "You look terrible," said his boss, Hector, 6 months into his new life. "Whatever you're doing at night, kid, maybe ease up." Julian merely nodded, dark circles under his eyes testifying to his midnight engineering sessions. What no one knew what no one would believe was that his design was working. The miniature prototype on his desk could store renewable energy with 60% more efficiency than anything on the market. One rainy Tuesday, a woman with curly hair and rain-splattered glasses entered the repair shop with a waterlogged laptop. "Please, tell me something can be saved," she pleaded. "Why dissertation research is on here." Julian worked through his lunch break, meticulously drying components and recovering her data. When she returned, her relief was palpable. "I'm Sophie Chen, and you just saved 3 years of environmental engineering research," she said, offering her hand. "How can I repay you?" Against his better judgment, Julian found himself inviting her for coffee. Perhaps it was loneliness, or perhaps fate, because Sophie turned out to be a researcher at the university's Energy Innovation Lab, over chipped mugs in a corner cafe. Julian cautiously mentioned his own background. "I used to work in renewable energy," he said. "The understatement of the year?" Sophie's eyes lit up. "What field?" "Storage solutions for solar applications." Their conversation stretched hours as Julian carefully revealed bits of his design testing. Her knowledge, her reactions. By evening, he'd made a decision. "I need someone to review something," Julian said finally. "Someone who won't steal it or dismiss it." In his tiny apartment, Sophie examined his notebooks and the small working prototype. With growing amazement, This could change everything," she whispered. "Who are you really, Julian Reed?" For the first time in a year, Julian smiled genuinely. Someone everyone gave up on far too soon. 3 years passed in a blur of 18-hour workdays. Julian and Sophie had moved operations from his cramped apartment to a small warehouse space in Tacoma. Funded by 2 angel investors Sophie had connections with, their company, Phoenix Energy Solutions, operated under the radar with Julian using the pseudonym J.R. Phoenix for all public documents. "The irony of hiding your success isn't lost on me," Sophie said one evening as they celebrated their first major patent approval. "Most people pretend to be more successful than they are." Julian watched the small team of engineers they'd hired working late across the warehouse floor. It's not about hiding success. It's about revealing it at the right moment. Back in Boston, Julian occasionally checked on his former life through social media. Reed Financial had recovered somewhat under his father's conservative leadership. Thomas had been promoted to VP, and Olivia had married the heir to a banking fortune. Their wedding photos showed her in designer silk, smiling beside a man who looked remarkably similar to Julian. "Still obsessing over ghosts?" Sophie asked, catching him scrolling through his phone. "Just reminding myself why we're doing this," Julian replied. By year 4, Phoenix Energy had secured contracts with 3 major utility companies for their revolutionary storage technology. Julian's innovation had expanded beyond his original concept to include a fully integrated renewable energy system that could power everything, from homes to industrial complexes at a fraction of traditional costs. "We've received another acquisition offer," Sophie announced during their morning meeting. "This one's for $2.8 billion. Their CFO Derek nearly spilled his coffee. "Oh, and we're turning it down again, aren't we?" Julian nodded. "We control the patents. We set the terms." By the 5th year, Phoenix Energy's valuation had exceeded $4 billion. Julian, still unknown as the company's true founder, had created what investors called the most disruptive energy technology of the decade. All while his former family and friends believed he was probably working retail somewhere, if they thought of him at all. "There's a clean energy conference in Boston next month," Sophie mentioned casually. "As CEO, you should present our new commercial rollout." Julian's heart raced. "Is it time?" Sophie smiled. "The phoenix rises from ashes, remember? That was always the plan." That night, Julian drafted an email to his mother, his first contact in 5 years. It contained only a ticket to the upcoming Reed Foundation charity gala and a note. "I'd like you to be there for what comes next." The Reed Foundation's annual charity gala transformed Boston's historical museum into a playground for the wealthy. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over guests in designer formalwear, while waitstaff circulated with champagne and canapes. Julian observed from the periphery, unrecognized in his bespoke suit, with a closely trimmed beard that hadn't existed in his previous life. "Quite the spectacle," murmured Sophie, stunning in an emerald gown. As Phoenix Energy's public-facing CEO, she'd received a legitimate invitation, allowing Julian to enter as her +1 across the room. Richard Reed, now silver-haired, accepted congratulations on the foundation's work. Nearby, Thomas held court with investors, laughing too loudly. And there was Olivia, still elegant, occasionally glancing at her husband with what looked like practiced affection, nervous. Sophie squeezed Julian's arm. "Strangely calm," he replied. "Like watching a movie I've already seen." The evening progressed, predictably, until the donation announcements began. Each year, companies pledged support for the Reed Foundation's environmental initiatives, a tradition Julian's mother had started decades ago. "And now," announced the foundation director, "we have an unexpected addition to our program. Representing Phoenix Energy Solutions, please welcome CEO Sophie Chen." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Phoenix was the mysterious clean energy company, disrupting markets worldwide Sophie approached the podium with confidence. Thank you for the warm welcome. Phoenix Energy is honored to announce a $50 million grant to the Reed Foundation's Climate Innovation Fund. Gasps and applause filled the room. It was the largest donation in the foundation's history. But there's more, Sophie continued. Our founder and chief innovator, who has until now remained private, would like to personally address you. Julian walked toward the stage, each step bridging the years of absence. Recognition dawned slowly on faces around the room, first confusion, then disbelief. Mother's hand flew to her mouth. His father froze mid-conversation. Thomas's smile disappeared. Hello, Julian said simply into the microphone. Some of you might remember me. The silence was absolute. 5 years ago, I stood before a different audience and was judged a failure, he continued. That judgment wasn't entirely wrong. I had failed not because my vision was flawed, but because my execution was premature. He explained Phoenix Energy's technology in simple terms, describing how the core concept had evolved from his original Reed financial proposal. With each word, his father's expression shifted from shock to understanding to something resembling pride. Sometimes, Julian concluded, we need to lose everything to discover what truly matters. As he stepped away from the microphone, the room erupted. Journalists frantically typed on phones. Investors swarmed Sophie. And through the chaos, Olivia stood perfectly still, her composed facade finally cracking as their eyes met across the room. The morning after the gala, Julian sat in a quiet cafe near Boston Common, watching early joggers pass by. Front pages of business sections featured his story. Reed returns as billionaire innovator. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from people who had once abandoned him. Is this seat taken? Julian looked up to find his father, standing there, looking older and somehow smaller than in his memories. Please, Julian gestured. Richard sat down carefully. Your mother told me about your invitation. She knew all along you'd be there. She deserved to know first, Julian replied. I deserved to be kept in the dark. There was no anger in the question, only sad acceptance. Julian stirred his coffee. Would you have believed me if I'd told you what I was building? His father's silence was answer enough. Across town, Phoenix Energy's temporary offices had been established for the conference. Sophie managed the sudden media attention while Julian reconciled with his past. His mother visited daily, bringing family photos and 5 years of stories. Even Thomas arrived one afternoon, uncomfortable but determined. I came to apologize, he said stiffly, and to see if there might be opportunities at Phoenix. Smiled. There are always opportunities for qualified people, cousin. Submit your resume to HR like everyone else. Unexpectedly, it was Olivia who proved most persistent, sending messages asking to meet for closure. Julian finally agreed to a brief lunch. I made a terrible mistake, she said immediately when they sat down. I should have believed in you. Julian studied her familiar face. 5 years ago, her rejection had devastated him. He felt only a distant compassion. It wasn't a mistake, he replied gently. It was a choice that reflected your priorities then. We all make choices, and now, she asked, hope transparent in her voice. People make different choices as they mature. Before Julian could answer, Sophie appeared at their table. Sorry to interrupt, she said, not looking sorry at all. We've got that meeting with the governor in 20 minutes. Julian nodded, standing. Olivia, I wish you happiness in the life you chose. Walking away with Sophie, Julian felt the final weight of his past lifting. You know, Sophie said as they stepped into sunlight, for a billionaire, you're surprisingly unvindictive. Julian laughed. Revenge was never the point. Proving something to myself was. That evening, at a small dinner with his parents and the Phoenix executive team, Julian announced the company's next phase, bringing affordable clean energy to developing regions. Money is just a scorecard, he told them. The real wealth is in what we build that outlasts us. As conversation flowed around him, Julian caught Sophie's eye across the table. In her smile, found something his billions couldn't buy. Someone who had believed in him when he had nothing. The Phoenix had risen from ashes. But the most valuable treasure wasn't the fortune he'd built. It was discovering who remained when everything else burned away.